as we continue to reflect on the passing of Queen Elizabeth II. We take a look at this aspect now. Since the news came of her passing, it has conjured up some mixed feelings, especially on the African continent and in the Caribbean. We speak now to Professor Donal Mccracken, Emeritus Professor of History in UKZN, reflecting on her legacy, or Britain's legacy, in relation to the continent. A very good afternoon to you, Prof. I think it was back in November when Barbados became a republic, renouncing the Queen, and in March this year the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge were met rather with much hostility in that country, as they wanted reparations, and they were also denouncing the Queen. Can you separate Queen Elizabeth from the monarchy?
No, you can't. And I think it's fair to say that very, very few people, possibly and ironically Nelson Mandela being one of them, actually knew the real, in inverted commas, Queen Elizabeth II. That is true what you say, and one of the greatest challenges that Charles III has facing him is the issue of the Commonwealth and what road the Commonwealth, if it's going to survive, and if it does survive, what road it's going to go down. As far as Elizabeth herself and her 70 years of rule, rule is the wrong word, reign is concerned, I think it's important to remember that Britain has got a figurehead monarchy. It hasn't got an executive monarch. It's not like South Africa where you have an executive presidency where the two, the figurehead and the executive are combined. It's separated, and as such, she in a sense doesn't exist when it comes to politics. She's not allowed to voice any political opinions, and doesn't voice any political opinions, and neither did her father, either before her, George VI. But you cannot divorce what is going on in the world. What you can say is that Britain changed very dramatically. The retreat from empire, which started really with the beginning of her reign, well, just before the beginning of her reign, made Britain into a different place. The British people, it's a dramatic thing to say it, but I think are a different people than they were in the interwar years. Certainly popular attitudes are very different. And you must ask, how did that change take place? And did Elizabeth have an impact on that change, and vis-a-vis things like Africa and the Caribbean? And I think the answer to that is yes. I think you have to give her due that not being allowed to say anything, but by her actions showing where her heart lay.
Not being allowed by whom, when people were made to pledge allegiance to the Queen?
Not being allowed by the unwritten British Constitution. That it is an established norm that the monarch cannot involve her or himself in politics. And if they did, I think the monarchy would disappear very, very quickly. But you can see from the results of the last 24 hours what's going on in Britain, that the monarchy is fairly strong at the moment. There's a great upswelling of affection for Elizabeth II. History will judge one way or the other. I think her personality was such not to be confrontational, that she tried to show by example, and there's no doubt about it that she made 20 state visits to Africa. Four, the most was Kenya, where there were 4, and then the 2 famous ones to South Africa, 1995 and 1999, 2 to Uganda. I think she had a great affection for Africa, and she certainly had the greatest affection for Madiba. But she could not involve herself in politics. There are stories circulating about how she confronted Margaret Thatcher over the issue of South Africa. And remember that the British monarchy didn't go near South Africa whilst there was a nationalist government in power between 1948 and 1994. They were in South Africa, the royal family, the year before when General Smuts was Prime Minister in 1947, but that was a slightly different ballgame.
Prof, you speak of an upswelling of affection, and when you take a look at some sectors on the continent, you have people saying, could she have, or asking whether she could have done more, especially where the issue of reparations is concerned. Also, in terms of the repatriation of some, looted artifacts that were taken from the continent.
She could, as far as the artifacts, if they were in royal collections, most certainly. But if they're things like, that are in the British Museum, she has no control at all over that. And there would be the greatest howl if she tried to interfere in such things. No, I think you have to recognise the constitutional position of a monarch in Britain. They can advise. And they can warn, but that has to be behind the scenes. It cannot be publicly. Now, Elizabeth II did make, she did drop the ball occasionally and did make mistakes. There's no question about that. The whole issue of how the death of Princess Diane was handled. The whole issue of Meghan Markle and the wedding and all that, how that was handled, I think there's legitimate criticism that can be made there. But on the high political front, no, it's unrealistic. It was never going to happen, and it could not happen under the British system.
Prof, it's often been said that with Russia's invasion of Ukraine, it's perhaps challenging or creating a new world order. You spoke of the Commonwealth, and if the new king would be able to keep that in place. If you take a look at your crystal ball and taking a look into the future, what do you perceive the relationship between Commonwealth countries, particularly on the continent, and the UK will be?
Yeah, you see, there's a different ball game now. There's Charles III did involve himself in controversial issues before he became king. Now, he got involved in things like attacking various aspects of modern architecture, the whole thing about natural products and what have you. He entered into the realm of controversy. The only thing is whether, now that he becomes king, whether he'll change, as Shakespeare say, to play the role in the way that is expected. And he says he's going to play the role in the way it is to be expected. But whether he can resist that, now if he starts involving himself in political issues, then I think it's not only the Commonwealth that's under threat, I think it's the monarchy itself that's under threat. As for crystal ball gathering, I'm a historian. I deal with dead people. I don't deal with people yet to be born. So I'm not going to be drawn on that. Also, I think it's fair to say there were what were called the spider letters, where Charles, Prince of Wales, was writing these letters in spidery handwriting to government ministers, and that was very much frowned upon. That was not the position of a member of the royal family to do that. After all, they're unelected. It's a hereditary thing. Under what guise, would they be involved in government? It would go against all that that has been fought for. And remember, Britain had its revolution. It had its revolution in the 17th century. It had a republic in the 17th century for a while, and it wasn't the greatest success. So I don't think there's going to be a republic. That I would predict in the next couple of generations. But I do think that the monarchy will change, and it will become smaller. I think that the financial aspects of the monarchy will be looked at. There'll be less people dependent on members of the royal family dependent on state funding, or even if it is through the royal estates. And I think the archaic titles like Order of the British Empire and Member of the British Empire, OBE and MBE and things like that, they have to go. And I think that they haven't gone was because people were waiting and waiting for the monarch to pass on and for a new dispensation to come. So I think there's going to be some dramatic pronouncements relatively soon as regards where the reform of the monarchy, the number of palaces, the number of castles, what's going to happen to them. I think those days, of this large number of great houses and moving round in state, like in the Middle Ages, I think that has passed. But I think it's too much to expect an English monarch to do more than hint at things. Like when the Queen went to Dublin not so long ago, it was very straightforward, but a state visit, head of a state and what have you. And then she made those couple of sentences. She spoke in the Irish language, and that probably said more and did more for good relations, which had been soured by other things since, but than anything else. So a monarch can, but it has to be under the radar. It really does.
Professor Donal Mccracken, Emeritus Professor of History at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Thank you.